Well, hello everyone. First of all, thanks very much for joining. A nice shout out from Tulip Sadiq for the panel there as well to get us started. But obviously the topic we're going to be getting into today is one of the more contentious, I think you could say, certainly one of the more delayed pieces of financial regulation at the moment. We've got a great list of panelists here from across the big buy now, pay later firms. So before we get into the meat of it, I'll just let them introduce themselves. So Flora, do you want to introduce yourself first of all?
Sure, I'm Flora Coleman. I head up global policy and government relations at Klarna, a fair and more sustainable way to access credit.
Hi, I'm Michael Saadat. I lead international public policy for Block, which owns Clearpay in the UK and Afterpay in other markets.
I'm Ruth Spratt. I'm the UK country manager for Affirm, who are not yet in the UK, but it is my role to get us ready to launch later this year.
And hi, I'm Desmond McNamara. I'm the Chief Risk Officer for Zilch.
Thanks. So, I did want to just start as a sort of kicking off point with the slightly optimistic name of the panel. The regulatory playbook is not here, unfortunately. We've had a lot of delays. There was an urgent warning from Chris Woolard in 2021. Flora, I wondered, as to a sort of kicking off point, could you just take us through where we are now, why 3 years down the line we're still not yet here with a regulated buy now, pay later sector?
So yeah, as you just heard, we've got a commitment from Labour to have regulation, and the Conservatives have government have repeatedly committed to regulation. We haven't got quite there yet, but there's been a number of consultations on proposals, and there's been clear commitment from industry, so all of these firms, to see that regulation come through.
The appetite's obviously there from the industry for regulation. If we just, I suppose, come on to some of the actual meat of what's come out of those consultations, and I'll come to all of you on this. Michael, as a kind of kicking off, what is your broad takeaway of what the FCA has proposed at the moment? I know you've got a sort of cross-market view. Is the UK looking proportionate on how it's regulating buy now, pay later and how it wants to?
I think one of the challenges that we've encountered here is that we're dealing with a 50-year-old piece of legislation in the Consumer Credit Act, and I think having to, we're facing a situation of trying to put a square peg in a round hole at the moment, and I think the government has acknowledged that the CCA needs to be overhauled, and there's a separate process to do that. And so there's a question of sequencing and phasing here that, how do we make sure we're regulating buy now, pay later in the right way, that we're not hampering innovation, we're applying the right sorts of consumer protections, and creating the right minimum standards for the industry to operate within, but at the same time we're not applying 50-year-old legislation to an industry that didn't exist when this legislation was created. So I think that is really part of the challenge. I think there's really good alignment and agreement among different players within the industry, but also with consumer advocacy groups around what the key consumer protections are. We all acknowledge that FOS membership and being part of the FOS is really important. Section 75 protections are really important. So there's some fundamentals that we all agree on, but the devil is always in the detail with these things, and I think we're encountering now the sort of challenge of trying to get that detail right. And I think the Treasury and the government have rightly acknowledged that it would be better to get it right than to rush it through.
On the FOS point there, that seems to be one of the elements that's raised some eyebrows. Does the cost structure work with the FOS within buy now, pay later? Does that concern you at all that the FOS is going to be the policeman there effectively? Oh,
I think we have to get that right, but that doesn't sort of mean that the FOS should not be part of the picture in terms of the framework. I mean, I think that's really a question of detail that I think can be worked through. I think otherwise, the FOS and having consumers with the ability to take a complaint to somewhere that will be free, impartial, and help them navigate a challenging situation is a critical consumer protection. So I think, broad agreement on that. I think the detail is important, but I think we can get through the detail.
And specifically on the FOS, it needs to be something that has consumer renown. You can't have one product category having to require to go to a separate body. There's obviously refinements, but the FOS has a really strong brand with consumers, and rightly so. And so we need that consumer simplicity to handle when there is harm.
Ruth and Des, you're obviously coming at this from a slightly different angle, both FCA-regulated firms. Are there learnings we can take from, I suppose, how you've been working with the FCA? What do you view this process like from the outside, and how might regulation actually affect you when it does come in as well? Ruth, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, so we will come to the UK with regulated products as well as traditional buy now, pay later products as well. So in terms of, you know, the structure, the policies, the process, the people that are needed to do that, that will all be there. But I still think there is a element of uncertainty of what the new regulation could bring. And I think what we need is the clarity of what that will look like and when it will come as well. So I think that's the question that we almost all need the answer to.
And Des, do you want to come in on that?
I suppose, and I took a little bit, there were some of the things that you talked about, which I don't know whether she'd actually just read the bio of what Zilch has done and sort of pitched it, because we actually did go through the FCA sandbox, so we're extremely supportive of that. We are regulated today, and we do deal with the FOS. So, you know, maybe I should be calling Tulip up after this and saying, look, I think it can be done. I think it would be really good for the industry if it were fully regulated, because there's lots of benefits of BNPL, you know, taking away the interest burden from consumers. But there is just a concern out there that because it's not fully regulated and it doesn't have recourse to the FOS, is there a downside? And I just think the quicker we get to being regulated, the better.
I mean, on that, for companies themselves, we've had such a drawn-out consultation process now. Is it going to be a cliff edge when regulation does actually come in? I know the line often from buy now, pay later companies is, we want to be regulated, we're taking the steps now. Flora, for Klarna, is there going to be a big change when regulation does come in? What's the internal change look like so far?
So at Klarna, we are a fully regulated entity. It's specifically the BNPL products that are outside of the scope of regulation, even offered by some firms that are also regulated, have products that are outside of FOS's scope, like Zilch. So,
No, as are all in scope by FOS.
okay,
Yeah,
every single product, cool.
yeah.
All learning things today.
It's possible today to do it this way. That's why the regulation needs to be sorted out. So there's a common process so that customers can get the same protection, the same coverage. BNPL has got some amazingly huge benefits.
We've got to see that the regulation captures all this because of that simplicity of the customer journey, with some products being outside of the scope of FOS. In terms of the cliff edge concept, I mean, it's just really, really straightforward. If you're a regulated firm, you're already doing all of the things you've, you know, outlined. Consumer duty, you've got your vulnerable customers. This has been years and years. Klarna's been in the UK for 10 years, was previously under the umbrella of our Swedish banking license, and now has, you know, payments license, credit licenses around the world. So the idea that regulation would be a cliff edge would only be for an unprepared firm.
Okay. Michael, just before we came onto the panel, you were discussing what's going on in Australia at the moment, the regulation there. And I mean, I hope you don't mind me quoting you, but you said it is perhaps a slightly more effective piece of regulation going through there than in the UK. Can you just take us through why you think that is?
Yeah, I guess in Australia we're dealing with a piece of legislation that the credit legislation came into force in 2009. So it's not a 50-year-old piece of legislation, it's more like a 15-year-old piece of legislation. And it has been proven, I think, a little less challenging for the government to create a new category within the legislation that will regulate buy now, pay later. So the government has made a decision to create a tailored framework that's going to be proportionate to the product. They will apply specific obligations and disapply other obligations that are not so relevant to the product. And we end up with something that actually is quite beneficial for the industry, but also provides that level of consumer protection that's needed. And so I think that shows that there is a path forward. It can be done, but the work needs to be done around getting the detail right. In New Zealand, actually, the regulatory framework for buy now, pay later will actually commence this September. The government put that into place last September with the 12-month transition period. And again, they've created something that's quite tailored and proportionate. So I think there's a lot of, we do see examples of this happening, and it's encouraging that governments are recognising the benefits of buy now, pay later, as Desmond talked about. You know, they're products that work really well for the vast majority of consumers, and preserving those benefits and allowing these products to compete effectively against other types of credit products, I think is really critical.
And are you, passing that on and flagging that to the Treasury as well? Are you hearing positive noises there that they are looking over towards Australia at that?
Yeah, I think that these days regulators and policymakers are always talking to each other, and I think we've seen Treasury here talking to their counterparts in other markets. The kinds of questions we get as a firm from different regulators, it's obvious that those discussions are taking place, which is really good. And I think, yeah, this is another example of where you've got firms that are operating in different markets, can bring that experience. And to Flora's point, I think we avoid a cliff edge as well because we're ramping up in other markets where regulation is taking shape. And the product is very similar in the different markets that we operate in. It's a global product essentially, and so that means we can ramp up and implement regulations as required.
Ruth, you've got a similar picture in a way, I suppose, where you've got the international outlook and now building in the UK. Is that a similar challenge? Do you look at UK and what's being proposed as, an anachronism compared to what has been, proposed in other markets as well?
I think, there are obviously similarities and differences, and, but when we come to the UK market, our purpose will be the same. And I think that purpose around, putting the customer first, providing honest financial products, making sure that what we're doing is what it kind of says on the tin is where we will come from as well. And I think although this has taken a long time in terms of the regulation actually coming, what's happened in the meantime is the number of people using buy now, pay later is growing. So that confidence is there. And I think the regulation will just give a big rubber stamp to that. And that's how we sort of see the market developing. So, I think the FCA's own research showed that from May 22 to January 23, it went from 17% to 27% of all adults ever had used buy now, pay later. So that confidence level is there. These are products that people want. And I'm so glad that we haven't started this session as I've started sessions in the past of saying why it's not payday lending. I think that has gone away as a thing now, and we've realised that actually these are products that consumers want and need. Yeah.
Well, Zilch is a company, I think it's fair to say, it's not sometimes shy of throwing a few barbs at some of the other models in the sector. Do you see there being an issue when you look at your peers? I don't want to start a fight on the panel in any way, but what's your view on some of your peers around regulation?
So I think we are all aligned, I believe, that regulation is a good thing, generically, and it's got to be tailored and it should be implemented. I think the Australians have set us all a challenge, which is their implementation plan is, Michael, I think you were talking about 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
I think the bar for getting this done is, we are a technology-based industry. We should be able to do this very quickly. So it would be lovely that in a year's time, when we were sitting here, we were asking us questions about how did your implementation go? That would be a great situation to be in. So I think we should set the bar high in terms of let's get there quick, because I think the product has got lots of protection. The discussion should be about why is someone being given, £1,000 credit facility with the full intent of rolling £500 of it into interest for the next 3 years? Why is that an appropriate product for people? Not why is something which is interest-free, which is being subsidised by the merchant, where you're being asked to repay over 3, 6, 9 months and be sensible with it. I mean, they're chalk and cheese, different products. I suppose the other challenge that Tulip challenged the whole industry on is late fees. So you can be an unregulated, and this isn't about BNPL, you can be an unregulated lender and charge late fees. I mean, we don't charge late fees, so again, she may have been reading our playbook. But I think to charge late fees, you should be regulated, because you haven't thought about the entire customer journey, you haven't done that consumer duty element. So again, I think there's many aspects of Tulip's speech which we would totally agree with.
And I suppose it plays into this wider, this sort of cultural debate around buy now, pay later. Ruth, you mentioned, batting away the suggestion it's like payday lending constantly. But in terms of the actual tone of the debate over the past few years, obviously surged into something like public consciousness after the pandemic, massive uptick in usage. Have you seen a shift, do you think, in the way that people talk about buy now, pay later in the past couple of years? Where do you think you are with the understanding of it? Flora, do you want to start on that?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I mean, that understanding and need for BNPL, I'm particularly, I had a child, he's 20 months old, And that big decision of buying a car seat is really, really challenging. A lot of people, parents are coming back off parental leave where your income has dropped by half, your household income, and you're looking at making that purchase. And I see time and time again my fellow parents saying, I don't want to go into traditional credit. I don't want to have unmanageable, unstructured finance with rolling at sky-high interest rates. I can't afford that. I can't manage that. Do you offer Klarna and others, of course? So that solution, that consciousness, is really, really important. We're solving a real problem, which is, fair and more sustainable credit, and that's really cutting through to consumers who need it right now.
And do you see that picked up by politicians? I know you've had some run-ins, perhaps, with certain Labour Party figures in the past. Do you think that understanding is there still? Is there a clash
There's a
still
real
between?
clear understanding from policymakers about the need for alternatives to high-cost credit. I was just talking to a number of, money and charity representatives who the traditional credit market hasn't been working for those consumers. And so the role that BNPL can play in terms of delivering better, lower-cost solutions, interest-free solutions that are manageable, structured, and short-term is absolutely something that's grown in understanding from policymakers across the spectrum.
And let's go big picture again. Sort of policymakers, the delay is obviously sat with the Treasury at the moment. There were reports that it had almost been kicked into long grass for fear of pushing buy now, pay later firms overseas. Do you think that's a serious worry that if we do sort of clamp down on buy now, pay later, there's going to be a flood of money and investment going overseas?
Most of us are already there. It's not a case of moving anywhere. We're already present. We're already regulated, most of us, in multiple markets. There's regulation not just in Australia. There's New Zealand. There's the CCD, so the reform of the Consumer Credit Act route legislation in Europe has already been completed in Europe and is now being run through in every single European market, which will come into force early next year as well, similarly to the Australian proposals. So it's it's just a part of the course, and we know how to handle regulation, and we want to handle regulation.
But just the uncertainty around it, doesn't send a great signal, I suppose, to firms who do want to set up shop and grow in the country.
I think it's more important the uncertainty for consumers. Right now, consumers want to know how to manage their finances, who to go to for when they have a complaint and an issue, how to deal with a regulated firm, and what those spaces are. And so, we've got to tackle it with regulation.
I think the uncertainty around the precise details of the regulations is there, but what we do have is a very supportive narrative coming from both the government and the opposition. I mean, you just heard the Shadow Minister talk about wanting to work with the industry closely and making sure that the fintech sector here is supported and nurtured, and that is actually more important than knowing precisely what the regulations will be, because the devil will be in the detail, but actually having an approach that recognises the value that this industry brings, the value that the products bring to consumers, and ensuring that we can continue to support that and the diversity of products as well is pretty critical. So I think that that vibe, I suppose, is really encouraging.
And Des, you mentioned that the Tulip Siddique's speech almost mirrored some of the things you're putting forward. Have you had a very open dialogue with the Labour Party? Are you encouraged by what you're seeing and what they're saying around regulation?
Well, I think we're supportive of either party or any party who is just going to get on with it, really. So, I am worried, Charlie, that you're not going to sleep tonight, that you'll have nightmares about, So we're UK headquartered, we're regulated in the UK, and we're not going anywhere. So you can be certain that at least one of us will still be here, okay, whatever happens. But look, I think if there was CCA reform, that would be brilliant. There are some very clunky steps in, adequate explanation documents, pre-contract information. It could be a lot better, okay? So anything that's done on that, brilliant. And I think we'd all be hugely supportive of a document which was readable by the general public and they knew what they got. But let's just get on with it. That's our general view.
And Ruth, did the delays at all, do they signal something around how regulators work in the UK? Are you worried about what they say about perhaps fintech more broadly? Do we need to move a bit faster on these kind of things?
That would be lovely. I think if we could move faster, that would be great. But I think you talked about firms exiting the market because of the regulation. That's the complete opposite for us because we're a US-based company, been in the US since 2012, and we're going to come into the UK. You know, we've been out publicly saying the UK is the first market that is on our international expansion map. So I completely agree with Desmond. It would be great if we could change some of the things that just simply don't seem to make sense from a consumer point of view, and, you know, making sure that we're doing the right thing in that customer journey to give the consumers the protections and the information that they need in a way that they can digest it, understand it, and read it on the smartphone would be great, because that's the way the world works now.
But you're right to press on this issue. You know, I've been working in fintech for the last 10 years here in the UK, and in other markets, you are seeing regulation see some providers close down or reduce services. But the UK is such a good market for fintech. We've got great consumers and we've got great businesses.
And, you know, we're coming into an election year. It's very uncertain. But are you hoping we're going to see some progress then in the next kind of 6 months or so?
Definitely.
Yeah, everyone concur. It sounds like there's positive noises coming out of the...
It would be nice not to be sitting here next year thinking about what it might look like. I think that would be great.
Yeah, and I mean, coming back onto Tulip Sadiq and Labour's pitch, are you, Michael, perhaps, are you sort of engaged with the Labour Party at the moment? Are you very confident about what you're seeing there?
Yeah, I think we've had good conversations with her team and very encouraging signals about the future of what buy now pay later regulation could look like. The fact that they're keen to work with industry, I think, is really important. And you know, it's been Labor governments in New Zealand and Australia that have implemented tailored and proportionate regulatory frameworks for buy now pay later. So for us, it's not a question of which political party is in control, but actually being able to make sure that, you know, policymakers and politicians understand the benefits of the product. As Flora said, you know, the conversations we're having nowadays are quite different to the ones we were having a few years ago. The average buy now pay later customer for us is now 37 years old. So, you know, not old, but not especially young either. So it's kind of become that mainstream product. 1 in 3 UK consumers are using buy now pay later. It's absolutely part of the landscape now.
Well, I think that's about all we have time for, but thank you very much for joining us and giving us that insight just to where we are at the moment. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Michael,